Christa Martin. 20-year-old Christa Martin lived alone in an apartment on South Osage Street in Wichita, Kansas. She had only recently moved into the unit during the fall of 1989. On October 1st, her family reported her missing after being unable to reach her. The following day, October 2nd, police visited Christa's apartment to check on her well-being. Inside, they discovered her body. She had died from blunt force trauma to the left rear side of her head and had also been sexually assaulted. Although investigators were unable to locate the weapon used in the attack, they did collect DNA evidence from the scene. Notably, there were no signs of forced entry into the apartment. At the time of Christa Martin's murder, DNA testing and the CODIS database were not yet in use. However, investigators took care to preserve the DNA evidence for future analysis. During their investigation, police noted that a domestic disturbance had been reported in the area near Christa's apartment about a week before her death, though it remained unclear whether that incident was related to her case. Between 1990 and 1992, detectives submitted evidence to the FBI crime lab in hopes of identifying a suspect, but the effort did not yield any breakthroughs, and the case remained unsolved. In February 2009, the DNA evidence was resubmitted to the Sedgwick County Regional Forensic Science Center. This time, it produced a potential suspect profile, but no matches were found in the CODIS database. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Now, let's move on with the video. Then, in 2020, the Wichita Police Department turned once again to the FBI, using advanced forensic technology to re-examine the DNA collected in 1989. They partnered with Othram, a company specializing in advanced DNA analysis, to see if new techniques could help uncover the identity of Christa's killer. The forensic material was sent to Othram's lab located in the Woodlands, Texas, for further testing. Othram's scientists developed a comprehensive DNA profile for the unknown perpetrator. After successfully completing the process, the DNA profile was delivered to the FBI's forensic genetic genealogy team, and the FBI team performed the necessary work to generate new investigative leads. In February 2021, a team consisting of a Wichita police cold case detective and an FBI special agent embarked on a journey to Alabama and Arkansas, collaborating with additional federal agents working in Maryland. Their mission was to conduct extensive interviews and gather additional evidence to break the case. Finally, in April 2023, a possible suspect, Paul Hart, was identified. Frustratingly, it was discovered that Hart lost his life in a car crash in Memphis, Tennessee in March of 1999. In February, the Wichita Police Department detective and FBI special agent traveled to Arkansas where they collected additional DNA samples from direct relatives of Paul Hart for further analysis. Through additional testing, investigators confirmed that Paul Hart was responsible for taking Christa's life. A press conference was held on October 2, 2023 to announce the update in the 34-year-old cold case. In fact, the announcement came exactly 34 years after Christa's body was discovered to the day. Detective Adam Vandermeulen, the lead detective working Christa Martin's case, said the Wichita Police Department never forgot Christa. It is just after the initial investigation. Investigators had nothing else to go off of, and that is when they looked at this case through another lens. For investigators to think in '89, we should probably do a DNA collection kit on her because maybe something will happen. Had they not done that in '89, we would not be looking at this point in time because that technology was not a thing back then, but it is now. I think it is evident that she was remembered on multiple occasions in '89, '09, and February 2020, Vandermeulen said. Sometime in the February, we honed in on a family through genetic genealogy, the Hart family. No ties to Wichita, not from Wichita at all, not really from the Midwest. They are from the great state of Arkansas. So I said, how does this tie into Wichita? These individuals weren't originally from the area, which raised some questions. So, investigators began looking deeper into the family's background. During that process, they uncovered a man who had been living in Wichita in 1989, the same year Christa Martin was murdered. Interestingly, not long after Christa's killing in October of that year, this person abruptly left Wichita and returned to Arkansas. What stood out was how completely this individual had flown under the radar. Christa's family had never heard of him. When investigators asked if the name sounded familiar, the answer was no. They even consulted the original detectives and reviewed the case files, checking through lists of people interviewed and neighbors spoken to. This person's name had never come up. This individual's name never came up in any of the investigations from '89 up until the present. He lived around the corner from Christa Martin's house, and it is 6 houses from Christa Martin's house where her life was taken. Vander Molen added that if it had been someone in Christa's circle of friends, he believed that the information would have been known much sooner. But since it was potentially such a stranger to her, investigators did not know who exactly they were looking for. It gives me goosebumps because it was there. We just did not know about it until a couple of months ago. They were about the same age range and by all accounts that I've been able to track down had no ties to one another. Just a chance encounter? I do not know. It is an answer that we will probably never know. What we did learn was that Christa was a very outgoing individual that frequented local drinking establishments and befriended people she encountered. It was not uncommon for Christa to get rides home from people she had recently met and invited them to her apartment. Vandermolen said that he hopes this case shows the department will work on cases until they cannot any longer. Sedgwick County's District Attorney, Mark Bennett, also spoke at the press conference. He said that when Wichita police presented the facts of the case to him, it was determined that charges would be filed if Paul Hart were alive today. Since the suspect is now deceased, the case is officially considered solved. Law enforcement had informed me that they were actively working on the investigation. Once they had exhausted all leads and reached their conclusions, with support from the Forensic Science Center, they presented the case to me, just as they would with any other. After reviewing all the evidence, the findings, and the DNA results, it became clear to me that, had the suspect still been alive, I would have filed charges. This investigation is now complete and officially closed. During the press conference, Christa Martin's niece, Amber Moore, expressed her gratitude to the investigators and volunteers who remained committed to solving the case. "I'm thankful that we can finally move forward and find peace, knowing the perpetrator is no longer among us or walking free," she said. "We are deeply grateful to everyone who played a role in bringing justice for Christa. She deserves so much more from life than what she received." Moving on to the next case. Debbie Lynn Randall. In 1972, 9-year-old Debbie Lynn Randall lived in Cobb County, Georgia, with her parents, John and Juanita Randall, and her older brother, Melvin. On the night of January 13th, Debbie was walking home from a laundromat across the street but never arrived at her house. A massive search involving around 4,000 people was launched, including Marietta civil defense workers, a local radio group, the Concerned Citizens Committee, and nearby college students who had heard about the disappearance and wanted to help. 16 days later, a college student who had volunteered for the search found Debbie's body near the intersection of Windy Hill and Powers Ferry Road. The autopsy revealed that she had been strangled and sexually assaulted. Key evidence in the case included a hair and a piece of cloth featuring a flowery pattern, both carefully preserved by investigators. 2 local children reported seeing a dark pickup truck backed into a parking lot near Debbie's home, which then sped away, leaving behind only laundry detergent. Despite thoroughly pursuing all leads, authorities were unable to identify a suspect, and the case eventually went cold. In 2001, the FBI performed testing on the hair found at the scene, which significantly narrowed the list of possible suspects. Later, in 2015, the piece of cloth was analyzed in a lab, and DNA testing produced a profile of an unidentified male. Additional DNA testing in February 2019, supported by extra funding, followed by a reanalysis of the cloth in February 2022, brought investigators even closer to resolving the case. These efforts led them to connect with individuals likely related to the suspect, who voluntarily provided DNA samples to assist the investigation. More testing was done, and in February 2023 brought up William B. Rose, who was 24 years old back in 1972 and lived in the same apartment complex where Debbie's family lived. Rose took his own life 2 years after he ended Debbie's life. Investigators made the announcement in September 2023 that Rose is the man responsible. Cobb County District Attorney Flynn Brody said, "It may take us some time, but with the new technologies that are coming out every day, we are going to do everything we can to solve our cold cases to make sure we bring people to justice. The answer we are providing today will not bring her back. We cannot extract justice from the perpetrator, but I know he must answer to a higher power." Ron Alter, a cold case investigator with the district attorney's office, said Rose had previous arrests for alcohol-related incidents and possibly took his own life due to fear of being caught by the police at the time, even though he was not a suspect. "If he drove by, I'm sure he saw her. I believe that was a crime of opportunity. He saw her by herself and abducted her," Alter said. The investigator confirmed investigators used ancestry websites to find familial matches to Rose from distant relatives and narrowed their suspect list from there. Debbie's brother, Melvin Randall, also spoke at the press conference. "I learned over the years that it does you no good to hate or hold grudges." Melvin is the only family member alive who heard the news. Debbie's mom passed away in February 2018, while her father passed away in February 2022. "I would like to say that I wish my mother was here, but I know she knows in heaven now that it is finally over. And we just want to say we thank all of you for what you have done to make this day come to pass," Melvin said. "After a while, I blamed myself for it because I was her big brother, and I battled with it for a while. But then I realized that there was nothing I could have done, and it just happened, and it was not my fault. I'm just grateful for the community. It's a relief that it wasn't someone we knew, and I'm just glad it's finally over. This has weighed heavily on us for a long time," said Melvin Randall, despite the losses he has faced and the painful nature of those experiences. He expressed no anger toward either William Rose or his own family. "I know they're struggling and going through this too. It was hard for us, and I'm sure it's just as hard for them," Melvin continued. "I wish them all well, and God bless them. I hold no animosity toward anyone." Morris Nix, a retired detective from the Cobb County Sheriff's Office who worked on the case, remarked, "Technology doesn't age. It doesn't retire, it doesn't get sick, and it doesn't quit. Technology was searching for William Rose, and it ultimately found him in the grave." Moving on to the next case. Katie Sepitch. Being at home means feeling safe. No matter what, you always know you can relax and feel secure within the walls of your home. It's that deep breath of relief you take the moment you step through the door. That warm, comforting sense of belonging is what home feels like. Yet, for some people, the fear of being attacked in their own home looms over them. You might not want to dwell on it, but you can't honestly say you haven't thought about it. That fear became very real when Katie Sepitch, 22, vanished from a party in Las Cruces, New Mexico. It was a nightmare that shook everyone. What made it even more terrifying was that her body was later found dumped in a remote, isolated area. As the police dug deeper into the case, they uncovered something horrifying. Katie had been killed just outside her own home. The story of Katie Sepitch was far from straightforward. From the crime scene details to the suspects involved, the investigation was far more complicated than it initially appeared. Shockingly, it took the police 3 years to piece together what had really happened, and when they finally did, the truth was nothing like anyone expected. Katie was born to Dave and Diane Sepitch on December 26, 1980, in Carlsbad, New Mexico. She was the eldest of 4 siblings, with 2 brothers, AJ and another, and a sister named Caroline. Katie was remembered as a kind and loving young woman, but as the oldest child, she also carried a strong and commanding presence. Katie liked to get what she wanted, but she always looked out for the people she cared about. My brother, AJ, says Katie was his best friend and guardian. She was known for being a bit of a clown once you got to know her. She would joke about everything and anything, even herself, according to one of her best friends. As the punchline of the joke, she was the one who pulled it off with style, wit, and comfort. Katie was an outgoing and sure of herself young woman. People who knew her liked her, and she had a lot of friends. Katie was going to New Mexico University at the time of the case. She wanted to get a degree in business administration, which sounded like a great idea. She was sure of herself, calm, and smart, so this was pretty much the right job for her. She lived in an apartment on the east side of Las Cruces, New Mexico, close to her campus. She also worked part-time as a waitress at El Sombrero Patio Cafe, a lively and famous Mexican restaurant in Las Cruces. Katie still didn't know what she was going to do after college even though she was in college. There was no sign of a job or anything like that for her even though she was working towards a degree. Giant, Katie's mom, said that Katie wanted to change the world and dreamed of doing something big, important, and life-changing. She just didn't know what it was yet. Katie was seeing someone at the same time. That person was another college student named Joe Bischoff. He was majoring in biochemistry. They were deeply in love with each other, and Katie knew that he was the person she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. Joe also fell in love with Katie's fiery and sweet attitude. He loved Katie so much that he bought her a diamond engagement ring. The two were looking forward to graduation because that would be the official start of their lives. Joe's gift was very kind. Things didn't go as planned, though. Katie wanted to keep going to college to get a master's degree after she got her bachelor's degree. But Joe moved back to Gallup, his hometown, and got a job there. They were still together. They just had different things to do in life. They would see each other when they had time in their busy plans. Sadly, Katie would not be able to do any of the things she had planned. Everything went wrong on one terrible night in February 2003, and she had to cancel all of her plans. Joe and Katie were going to meet up in Las Cruces on August 30th, 2003. Katie, her roommate Tracy, and Joe were asked to a college party in a neighborhood about a mile from Katie's house. The plan was to have a great time and then spend the night at Katie's house because it was Labor Day weekend. When Tracy woke up the next morning, Katie was gone, which made her feel bad. You could see Joe there, and Katie's things were also there, like her purse, cell phone, and house keys. Katie wasn't in the house when Tracy and Joe looked for her. They called Katie's friends and even went to Tracy's house to look for her. As people began to worry about her, Tracy quickly contacted Katie's parents and asked them if Katie had been to see them. Katie went missing on August 31st even though her parents didn't know where she was either. Detectives got right to work, and they didn't have to look for long because Katie's body was found the same day, just hours after she was reported missing. People from Las Cruces were walking by an old dump site when they saw something on the ground. Investigations were called right away because it was a woman's body. The cops taped off the area and looked at the body. It was a horrible scene. It wasn't hard to figure out that the poor woman had been used because the body was lying face down and naked. Arms and face cuts on the body were used as defense, and DNA was found under the nails in the form of skin. The body also had burn marks, which showed that the person who attacked her tried to set her on fire afterward, but failed. There were also tire tracks near the body that the police found. They looked clean, like someone dumped her there in a car. The police thought that the attack did not happen in the empty area because of this. Most likely, the woman was killed somewhere else, and then her body was dumped in a remote part of Las Cruces. Since Katie had just recently gone missing, the cops had a good feeling that it might be her. At this point, they didn't even know who the victim was, so Katie's dad, Dave, was called in to help identify the body. Sadly, the body belonged to Katie Sepitch, who is 22 years old, and her dad was the one who identified her. The last people who saw Katie were her best friend Tracy and her boyfriend Joe. This led investigators to focus on them more closely. When the police asked Joe about it, he said that they got to the party together. But after a while, he saw that Katie wasn't there. At first, he didn't think much of it because he thought Katie might have left early. It wasn't until Katie didn't show up the next day that he became worried. At the same time, a group of police officers were put in charge of going to Katie's house and looking for anything strange. But when they got to Katie's house, they did find something strange. For starters, a pair of women's shoes was found on the ground next to the bedroom window. It looked like they were kicked off without a plan. Yes. You got it. Katie owned those shoes. As the detectives looked up through the window, they were shocked to see the screen lying on the ground. The window itself was locked, and nothing was broken, but her screen was taken off and put on the ground. This made the detectives think of an idea. They thought Katie did leave the party after all. But when she got home, she realized she forgot her keys. She finally chose to break into her own house by climbing up to her bedroom window. The other people thought Katie was tired and didn't want to walk back to the house where the party was held to get her things. The cops thought that Katie had been attacked at this time. Still, there was one more question. Who did it? Did Katie know that person? Was the attack just happen? Why did Katie leave the party? There were way too many holes. The police then talked to Katie's friends again and found out why she left the party. She was mad at her boyfriend, Joe, because she saw him kissing another girl at the same party. The officers thought this was strange right away, not because Joe had been fired for being a jerk, but because he had never told the police about this. He had some things to explain now. Joe told the cops that he didn't know why Katie left the party in the middle of the night when they first asked him about it, but it looks like he did know after all. It was his fault. The cops became very suspicious of Joe after this discovery because he had basically lied to them. In the end, Joe did say that Katie was mad at him and that he was the reason she left. But he also said that he drove down Katie's street to check on her and even tried calling her the morning she disappeared. These guys thought this was also strange to hear. Joe knew Katie had left her phone at the party, so why did he call her when she wasn't with him? Detectives thought that Joe was doing this to hide his tracks and throw off the cops. This made them even more afraid of Joe. At that point, DNA was the only way for the police to show Joe was involved. It was the early 2000s, so DNA testing wasn't as common as it is now. Still, DNA matching was possible at that time, and the police wanted to get Joe's DNA to see if he was the one who attacked Katie. But what Joe did next made the police think he was up to no good. He flat out said he wouldn't give his DNA for tests. The cops saw this as a clear sign that Joe was keeping something from them. The cops were once again caught in the middle. They had a strong feeling that Joe was the person who did it, but the evidence was weak. DNA testing would have been the only solid proof of Joe's involvement, but Joe chose not to give it to the police. Katie's family was deeply shocked by Joe's behavior. He acted suspiciously and refused to cooperate, even though he was the man Katie loved. To them, it was possible he could have been involved in her death. The Sepitch family felt a whirlwind of emotions, but none could ease their grief. Early in their long search for Katie's killer, they also urged Joe to agree to a DNA test. Meanwhile, police questioned every man who knew Katie and compared their DNA to the samples found at the crime scene, but none matched. Officers kept Joe under close watch, but since he showed no unusual behavior, the detectives grew even more puzzled. Months went by, and then suddenly, the police received new information. Katie and Joe had been intimate on the night of the party, August 30th. To find out more, they tested the bedding in Katie's room and found male DNA on it. When it was sent to be matched, the results were not positive. The DNA from the man on the bed, which was almost likely Joe's, did not match the DNA from Katie's body. That's why the police thought Joe might not have been the criminal after all, but they needed to be sure. And to do that, they needed DNA from the man himself. That's when the police called Joe. They wanted to let him know that his DNA didn't match the killer's because they wanted to be sure and officially rule him out as a possibility. Lucky for them, Joe finally agreed to give his DNA. When it was checked, it didn't match the killer's DNA. So Joe didn't kill Katie even though his deeds and stories were all over the place. Joe told the police that he didn't want to give his DNA because he knew that he and Katie had been sexual hours before. So he thought that they would find his DNA on her and think that he killed her. Even though Katie's family was very upset to hear this, you can't really blame the guy. That was a very honest assessment, and he may have gotten away with it. But because Joe didn't want to help, the investigation into Katie's murder hadn't moved forward in 3 long months, even though it's scary to be blamed for a crime. Joe should have been honest from the start because Katie's case would not have moved so slowly. Since Joe wasn't the killer, the police had to go back to their original plan to find the real killer. They now thought that Katie's killer was probably someone they didn't know. Using the DNA, the police were able to figure out what race the killer was. They came to the conclusion that the bad guy was probably a male Hispanic. Also, remember that tire tracks from a pickup truck were found where Katie's body was. The killer was probably Hispanic and drove a pickup truck, which gave the cops some information, but it was still not much. Investigators followed every lead and checked all the known criminals in the area. Katie's family even offered a $100,000 prize for information leading to her capture, but, unfortunately, nothing was found. At one point, Katie's mom, Jian, gave up on ever getting justice for her daughter, but she stuck to her will because she didn't want Katie's case to end. The Sepitch family did everything they could to keep the case in the public eye, but 3 long years had gone by in an instant. But Katie's parents had some hope because in December 2006, a DNA match came up. The killer's DNA was sent to the Cody's database, but there was no match at that time. After 3 years, however, Codas called the Las Cruces cops and shared some exciting news with them for the first time in a very long time. Who was this person whose DNA matched Katie's killers? It was a man named Gabriel Ovila who was 27 years old. Thank goodness. This man was already in jail in February 2006 for aggravated burglary and assault. It was because of this sentence that his DNA was sent to Cody's. This act was done by Gabriel only 3 months after Katie was attacked. He broke into a house with a knife and planned to rob it, and maybe even hurt the woman who lived there. He didn't know that the woman also had a roommate, which was lucky because when the roommate heard Gabriel breaking in, he ran away in fear. Eventually, the cops caught him, but they let him go on bond. As soon as Gabriel got out, he ran away. He stayed out of trouble for about 14 months before he was caught again and found guilty of the crime he tried to commit in November 2003. He was given a 9-year prison term for the charges. This was the man whose DNA matched Katie's killer. Since Gabriel was still being held, the cops wanted to learn more about him to help build their case against him. However, the detectives learned that Gabriel was married before, though the marriage ended in divorce. The police wanted to talk to Gabriel's ex-wife to find out more about him and find out where he was on the night of August 30th. When the cops found the woman, they were shocked to learn that Gabriel did own a pickup truck in February 2003 around the time of Katie's attack. What really set Gabriel's ex-wife off though was something she found in the truck's cup holder. It was a ring with diamonds. Katie wore it all the time. Joe gave it to her as a gift. When Katie's body was found, there was no ring on her finger. Even her parents said she wore it all the time, but it wasn't there when her body was found. For some sick reason, Gabriel took the ring, but it helped the agent with his work. It will sound like I made up the next part, but trust me, it's not. 3 years after the fact, Gabriel's ex-wife still had that ring on her. She thought Gabriel was cheating on her, and I think she probably wished he had been at this point because the real story behind the ring was much worse. Gabriel was linked to Katie's murder by this one very strong piece of proof. The woman gave the cops the ring, and they knew they needed to talk to Gabriel again. Gabriel was in jail in New Mexico at the time, and when investigators asked him about Katie Sepitch, he at first pretended not to know anything. That's exactly what the police expected, so they confronted Gabriel and showed him the ring as evidence. When Gabriel saw the ring, his entire demeanor shifted. He realized he could no longer deny what had happened and finally confessed to the terrible crime. Gabriel claimed he didn't know Katie. He said that on the night of August 30th, he was driving his pickup truck when he nearly hit someone walking along the street. That person turned out to be Katie, who was 22 years old, and that's how they first crossed paths. When Gabriel offered her a ride home, Katie declined, so they both continued walking. That should have been the end of the story, but it wasn't. Gabriel admitted he felt troubled and uneasy seeing a young, vulnerable woman alone at night, and eventually, he followed her home. Katie broke into her own house from the bedroom window as soon as she got home and realized she had left her keys at the party. Once Gabriel saw this, he jumped at the chance to do something that would tragically lead to murder. Gabriel sneaked up on Katie from behind and pushed her to the ground. Katie fought for her life at that point. She did everything she could to fight Gabriel off, and she even scratched him. However, Gabriel was better than Katie, which was sad. He was much bigger than her, and he soon beat her up, pinned her down, and then sadly killed her. Gabriel told me that he didn't let her go after he got what he wanted because he was afraid she would have called the cops. After that, he put Katie's body in his truck, drove to the dump, and dumped her there while setting all the proof on fire. Gabriel thought the fire would get rid of all proof of the crime. However, the fires went out sometime after Gabriel left. This could have been because of the wind or a lack of accelerant. Regardless, Gabriel's plan failed, and he didn't even know it. That was what ultimately brought him down. Gabriel was charged with attack and murder of Katie Sepitch on December 26, 2006. After he admitted to what he did, he pleaded guilty. Gabriel Avila was given a 69-year prison term by the jury. He had to start serving it after serving 9 years for burglary and assault. As of right now, he is still living and being held at the medium-security Lee County Correctional Facility in Hobbs, New Mexico. Katie's law DNA is a very important piece of proof for solving any crime, and Katie's case was finally solved because of it. Unfortunately, it was 3 years too late. In that time, the real criminal tried to commit another crime but failed. In the meantime, the police questioned an innocent guy who is still a scumbag. Katie's family was happy with the sentence, but they still thought that something should be done to make sure that criminals don't get away with crimes just because their DNA isn't in the database. The Sepitch family asked for a new law to be made after Gabriel was sentenced. It is called the Katie Sepitch Enhanced DNA Collection Act of February 2010, or just Katie's Law. Katie's parents pushed for this rule so that DNA and other modern technologies could be used quickly to catch criminals. The law called for collecting DNA from people who are caught, charged, or indicted for violent crimes like murder, assault, stalking, kidnapping, or abduction. It was also required by law to use DNA samples to make profiles of criminals so that they could be caught and convicted quickly. This would give the victim's family peace and closure and stop the criminal from hurting anyone else. Susana Martinez was the governor of New Mexico at the time and the prosecutor in Katie's case. In April 2011, she signed the bill into law. Now that we look back, Katie's legacy is the passing of Katie's Law. Her family is at peace knowing that Katie is still honored. Katie didn't mean this when she said she wanted to do something big or change the world, and neither did her family. Tragically, a chance encounter with a stranger forever altered Katie's life. Her family deeply feels her absence, with her parents, brothers, and friends holding on to memories of her radiant smile and eyes full of hope and light. While nothing can erase the pain of her loss, it's hoped that Gabriel's sentencing has brought some measure of comfort to the Sepitch family. Katie's death remains a haunting reminder of the fragility of life. It's terrifying to realize how quickly a stranger's anger can erupt into something so horrific. Gabriel and Katie were complete strangers. Yet Gabriel, who was not just a stranger but a cruel and monstrous individual, violated and took the life of a young woman who had done nothing to deserve such violence. In that moment, Gabriel chose to end Katie's life before it had truly even begun. Moving on to the next case. Lisa Holm. Lisa Holm was born on February 7, 1998, in the quiet Swedish town of Havdi. She lived there with her parents and older sister in a calm and peaceful environment. Known for her kindness, optimism, and determination, Lisa had clear goals from a young age. Even before graduating high school, she dreamed of studying architecture in Australia. She also traveled extensively with her family, visiting many different countries. From her teenage years, Lisa demonstrated a strong sense of independence by working various part-time jobs to earn her own money. In the summer of 2015, at age 17, she landed her first serious job at a cafe located about 40 minutes from home. Initially, Her parents drove her to work, but soon her father bought her a scooter, an ideal gift since she already held a license for it and couldn't get a driver's license until she turned 18. Lisa was thrilled, eager to manage her own commute. For the first few weeks, Lisa's father drove alongside her in his car, as she had little experience navigating the roads on her own. Since she only worked on weekends, he accompanied her every morning and evening to ensure her safety. This continued until June 7th, when he finally allowed her to make the trip to the cafe by herself. Around lunchtime that day, her parents decided to drop by the cafe to visit and share a meal. The cafe was quite busy, and Lisa was caught up with work. She managed to take a brief lunch break to snack with her parents before they headed back home. At 6:23 p.m., Lisa sent her father a message saying she was leaving work. Just 3 minutes later, he received a call from her. When he answered, there was no response, only background noise. He assumed Lisa had accidentally pocket-dialed him, as he could hear faint voices and what sounded like a car door closing. Thinking she was chatting with coworkers, he didn't suspect anything unusual at the time. He called Lisa's name several times with no answer, then ended the call and began waiting for her to get home. But she didn't show up. An hour passed and Lisa's parents started to worry. She should have arrived by now, so her father immediately thought something might have happened to her on the way. It was her first time riding alone on the scooter, and he was deeply concerned about her safety. He tried calling her several times, but Lisa's phone was off. After waiting a few more minutes, her father decided to hit the road, hoping to meet her along the way since Lisa should have taken the shortest route. The father feared Lisa might have had an accident, so he drove at a slow pace scanning the road. But Lisa was nowhere to be found. The man eventually reached the cafe without finding his daughter. Upon arriving at her workplace, he noticed Lisa's scooter parked in front of the building. By that moment, the man was already in a state of panic, having been unable to find his daughter throughout the entire way. Seeing her scooter, he immediately calmed down, thinking that for some reason, she was delayed at work. However, there was no one in the cafe, and the man noticed something else. Lisa's scooter keys were left in the ignition, with a helmet hanging from its handle. All of this led him to believe that something bad had happened to his daughter. She would have never left the keys in the scooter, abandoning it in the parking lot unattended. Meanwhile, Lisa's mother called the cafe owner in hopes of shedding light on her daughter's whereabouts. But the woman claimed to have no idea where she could have gone. She had called her employees around 6 p.m., and they said they were closing the cafe. After the call from Lisa's mother, the cafe owner immediately got into her car and headed there. On the way, she called 4 of her friends, who lived nearby, and asked them to help with the search. When the cafe owner arrived at the scene, they, along with Lisa's father, began searching both the establishment itself and the surrounding area. Their last hope was that Lisa, for some reason, might have decided to take a bus instead of the scooter. They checked the schedule, and her mother, along with Lisa's older sister, drove to the bus stop in their town. Unfortunately, this version was not confirmed. Lisa was not on the bus, so her relatives immediately contacted the police. By that time, it was almost 10 p.m., and it already got dark outside. The police immediately launched extensive searches. The fact that Lisa's scooter was left in the parking lot with the keys led them to consider the possibility of abduction. Cases like this are quite rare in Sweden, especially in the remote provincial area where Lisa's town was located. Therefore, police immediately dispatched several groups with search dogs while other officers began knocking on every house located near the cafe. When Lisa's classmates and her friends learned about her disappearance, they began spreading information about it on social media, hoping to attract more attention and possibly find some witnesses. The search continued all night, but it yielded no results. On Monday morning, the police department announced Lisa's disappearance to the public, urging anyone who has some useful information to come forward. Around the same time, a man who came to work at a barn right across the cafe discovered a motorcycle glove on the floor and reported it to the police. Detectives had already inspected this barn on the evening of Lisa's disappearance, but they hadn't noticed the glove there. They showed it to Lisa's parents, who confirmed that the glove indeed belonged to their daughter. This further supported the abduction theory, and the police deployed additional resources for the search. By that time, news of Lisa's disappearance had spread throughout the country, and hundreds of volunteers joined the search. On Tuesday, police received several more alarming clues. Volunteers searched the area along the dirt road located a few hundred yards from the cafe. There, they found a phone case, a receipt, a ticket, and a broken smartphone screen. Investigators immediately determined that all these items belonged to Lisa and focused the search in that area. Soon, they found other parts of the broken smartphone, Lisa's ID, and several more receipts. All these items were scattered along the same dirt road. After the discovery of those pieces of evidence, the police became almost certain that Lisa had become a victim of abduction. They threw all available resources into the search, and with each passing day, more and more people joined in. This case became the main news topic in Sweden, and hundreds of volunteers flocked from all over the country to participate in the search. A local volunteer organization specializing in finding missing people also joined the effort. All of this made Lisa's search operation the largest in the country's modern history, with over 1,000 people participating in total. The police also received numerous calls with tips. One woman recounted that she went for a jog the day before Lisa's disappearance. At some point, a man who stood next to his car stopped her in the middle of the road. He spoke to her in English and asked for directions to a city she had never heard of. She tried to show him the way on Google Maps, but the man asked her to get into his car and show the route on his navigator. Naturally, the woman found this request quite suspicious, so she refused and continued running. She also shared one interesting detail with the police. The woman believed she had already seen this man among the workers who were repairing the same barn located across the road from the cafe. Lisa's colleagues also shared one observation. On the day of her disappearance, one of the witnesses noticed two men standing across the road from the cafe looking towards the establishment. She didn't think of it much at the time, but after Lisa's disappearance, she decided to share this fact with the police. The following morning, Wednesday, Lisa's father and a few friends returned to the dirt road near where some of her belongings had been discovered. As they moved farther along the path, they stumbled upon more distressing items: Lisa's driver's license and her house keys. The findings suggested a chilling scenario. Lisa may have been taken down this road, with her abductor discarding her possessions from a vehicle during the kidnapping. Police and volunteers focused their search efforts in this specific area, though no additional evidence turned up. Later that evening, one of Lisa's father's friends was heading home after assisting in the search. As he passed by the cafe, he noticed that the police tape had been removed from the barn where Lisa's glove had previously been found. Acting on instinct, he decided to take another look around. With darkness setting in, he retrieved a flashlight from his car and carefully searched the area. After several minutes, something reflective on the ground caught his eye. Upon closer inspection, he found a woman's earring, and then spotted a matching one nearby. The man reported this to the police, who showed the earrings to Lisa's parents. They confirmed that these pieces of jewelry belonged to their daughter. The police once again sealed off the barn and searched it more thoroughly. The lead detector later explained that on the first day of Lisa's search, their main focus was on finding the girl herself, so the barn was inspected not so thoroughly. They might have missed such small items as earrings, but now they brought in numerous forensic experts along with search dogs. This time, they noticed a rather unusual piece of evidence. Behind one of the walls, the police found human feces. At first glance, it may seem unrelated to the case, but the forensic experts put forward a quite interesting theory. They explained that when criminals commit serious and horrible crimes, their body produces an extreme amount of adrenaline, which sometimes leads to the uncontrollable need to relieve themselves. For example, it's common for killers to wet themselves before or during the murder. Considering that Lisa's glove and earrings were found in the barn, the police theorized that if she was indeed abducted, the perpetrator might have dragged her into this building. Therefore, detectives didn't rule out the possibility that this person, under the influence of adrenaline, couldn't hold it and relieve themselves, so these feces were sent to DNA analysis. On Friday, The search area was expanded and volunteers reached a farm located about 2 miles from the cafe. It was a complex of several large buildings where many people worked, and the search team decided to inspect them all. However, shortly after they arrived, 2 men came to the farm. They didn't speak Swedish and communicated only in English. One of them said that the police had already been at this farm, but the search team leader didn't rush to believe it. He thought that he would have known about it if that were the case, so he decided to continue the search. The 2 men walked around the farm for a while, watching the volunteers, and eventually drove away. About an hour later, members of the search team found a pile of branches behind the cowshed. Under it, they found a motorcycle helmet, jacket, and headphones. The police immediately arrived at the scene and confirmed that all these items belonged to Lisa. They sent forensic experts to the farm for a more thorough search. Detectives also heard the story about the 2 strange men who tried to dissuade the volunteers from inspecting the farm. The police also recalled the story of a woman who encountered a suspicious man speaking English while jogging. In fact, they already had an idea who it might be. From the first days of the search, they had visited all the houses near the cafe. And in one of them lived 2 brothers from Lithuania along with the wife of one of them. All 3 didn't speak Swedish and communicated in English. They were the only people within several miles who didn't speak the local language. The police also had other indirect reasons to suspect them. The brothers worked in the barn, across the road from the cafe and at the farm where Lisa's helmet was found. They were familiar with these locations, and the dirt road where Lisa's belongings were found led to their house. Considering that there were no other suspects, the police decided to question all 3 of them. Meanwhile, forensic experts arrived at the farm. Together with the volunteers, they continued to inspect this area, and soon, their attention was drawn to an old trailer. It was surrounded by tall grass and looked as if it hadn't been used in many years. But next to its door, the grass was flattened, as if something had been lying there recently. Some of the grass was also trapped under the door, indicating that it had been recently opened. As soon as the forensic experts opened the door, they were immediately met with a strong smell of decay. Inside the trailer, there were many lockers for clothing. Apparently, it was once used as a changing room for workers. All the lockers except one were locked, leading the experts to suspect that Lisa's body might be in one of them. They began opening each locker and eventually saw that Lisa's body was actually in one that was left open, hidden behind a pile of old clothes and rags. Despite the small size of the locker, the perpetrator managed to fit their victim inside. Lisa had a rope around her neck and a large amount of tape over her head. Her pants were pulled down and her shirt was pulled up. Medical experts determined that Lisa died from strangulation. However, they found no signs of sexual assault. All of her clothing was handed over to the lab while news of the discovery of her body rapidly spread throughout the country. All this time, the news of Lisa's abduction dominated headlines in Sweden. When her body was found and the public learned of Lisa's brutal murder, the case shook the entire country. Such crimes were extremely rare in Sweden and people were shocked that someone could commit such a heinous act. On the same day that her body was discovered, something unusual and rather eerie occurred. YouTube users stumbled upon a video posted 13 days before the murder. The video was titled 13 and it featured a countdown timer. What was most unsettling was the name of the channel that uploaded the video. It was called Lisa Holm. News of this video quickly spread throughout the media, leaving many people stunned by the series of coincidences. Some people began to speculate that someone had predicted the murder, but in reality, it turned out to be much simpler. It appeared that someone had just changed the channel name and video title after Lisa's body was found. Either this person wanted to spark another conspiracy theory or was just playing a cruel prank. Meanwhile, the police were doing everything in their power to find the killer as quickly as possible. At the time of Lisa's discovery, investigators had already brought in 2 brothers and a woman, and they all denied any involvement in the murder. They claimed that at the time of the abduction, they were at home, providing alibis for each other. According to their accounts, the older brother, Neregis, was asleep in his room while his wife was preparing dinner, and the younger brother was on the computer. Neregis also added that around 8 p.m. he woke up and went to the gas station where he bought pizza and cigarettes. The police were pretty skeptical of their alibis, as all three could have simply been covering for each other. They collected their DNA samples, but investigators still lacked any evidence directly linking any of them to the murder. However, this didn't last long. Forensic experts were working in the barn and on the farm, utilizing all available resources and manpower, and soon their efforts paid off. In the barn, there was a small, office-like room. It had a large window overlooking the cafe. Upon examining this room, experts discovered 15 different traces of male semen on the walls and floor near this window. It appeared as if someone had stood there watching the cafe employees, including Lisa, and satisfying themselves. These semen samples were immediately sent to the laboratory, and experts quickly extracted DNA profiles from them. All 15 semen traces matched the DNA of the older brother, 35-year-old Neregis. The same applied to the feces found in the barn. They also belonged to him. In the next room, which had previously been used for storing cow's milk, forensic experts noticed a pipe about 2 feet above the floor covered in a thick layer of dust except for a small strip. The size of this strip perfectly matched the rope used to strangle Lisa. Traces of blood were also found on this pipe, and the DNA analysis confirmed it belonged to Neregis. On the floor beneath the pipe, they discovered a piece of the same rope. Experts examined it and identified 2 DNA profiles, Lisa's and Neregis's. This was a significant breakthrough for the police. It finally linked the man to the rope used to kill the victim. Furthermore, a hair belonging to Lisa was found on the floor of this room. Another crucial piece of evidence: Neregis were also found on it. Based on this evidence, police concluded that Lisa was likely killed at that very location. They reconstructed an approximate timeline of events. Neregis had been watching the cafe for some time and approached Lisa when she was alone in the parking lot. According to a jogger's testimony, he may have asked Lisa for directions to a nearby city or used another pretext. Then, Neregis might have invited her into his car to enter the route into his GPS. Given Lisa's kind nature and willingness to help others, she probably agreed. Once inside the vehicle, the attacker gagged her and drove her to the barn. There, he strangled her by tying a rope around her neck and hanging her from a pipe. Medical experts suggested that the scene aroused him so intensely that he lost control of his bowels from the adrenaline surge. After Lisa died, he placed her body in the car and drove to the farm, discarding her belongings out of the window along the way. There, he hid the body in the trailer locker, covering it with old clothes scattered around. All of this, from the moment of the abduction, took the perpetrator less than an hour. Despite all the evidence, Neregis continued to insist on his innocence. His wife and younger brother had to be released because there was nothing against them. Once free, they almost immediately left Sweden and returned to their homeland, Lithuania. The preparation for the trial was intense. Neregis claimed he had worked in that barn for a long time, suggesting his DNA could have been present there due to his job. Additionally, he had an alibi provided by his wife and brother. Although there were serious doubts about the credibility of both sources, in court this could have definitely worked in his favor. On the other hand, the presence of Neregis' DNA on the victim's clothing could only be explained by direct contact with her on the day of the murder. The police also found a witness who saw his car near the cafe shortly before and after Lisa's abduction. According to them, the car passed along the road between the cafe and the farm several times at the same time when Neregis was supposed to be sleeping at home, according to his brother and wife. For several months after the discovery of her body, experts continued to examine all the available evidence using the most advanced equipment. Eventually, they uncovered traces of Neregis' DNA on almost all of Lisa's clothing, including the inside of her underwear. Considering that the whole country was still following the case, investigators continued to search for any other useful clues that could impact the legal process and further prove Neregis' involvement. They even went to Lithuania to speak with his wife and brother once again. The woman continued to insist that he did not leave the house between 6 and 8 p.m. But when it was the younger brother's turn, detectives suddenly got what they wanted. After telling him about all the evidence against his brother, and detailing what he did with the 17-year-old girl, the man decided to tell them everything. He claimed that Narages actually was not at home that evening and only returned around 7:30 p.m. He was covered in dirt and immediately threw all his clothes into the washing machine. When the police started to question all the residents and reached their house, Nerds just whispered to his brother, "Tell them I was home at that time." Later, Nerges explained that he was afraid he would be framed for a crime he didn't commit because he was an immigrant and had no alibi for the time of the abduction. The younger brother truly believed that his relative had nothing to do with it, but after hearing about all the evidence, he realized it wasn't the case. Lisa's funeral took place only a month after her murder. The church where it was held could only accommodate 130 people, but there were many more who came to say goodbye to her. Organizers even decided to set up benches and large screens outside so that everyone could watch the ceremony. The trial began 4 months after the murder. This case once again captured the attention of the entire country, so everyone involved in the process was under tremendous pressure. None of them had the right to make a mistake. Naragi's lawyer insisted that his client's DNA could have ended up on the victim's clothing because he had worked in the barn. The prosecution, however, pointed out that this version made no sense, especially in the case of Lisa's underwear. The only way the suspect's DNA could have ended up there was if he touched the victim's underwear. The lawyer couldn't provide any other solid facts pointing on his client's innocence. At one point, he tried to push the version that the real murderer was Naragi's younger brother. According to this theory, the brother somehow took multiple samples of Naragi's DNA and placed them on the victim's body as well as at the crime scene. However, the lawyer failed to explain the possibility of such manipulations with the DNA. The trial lasted for a month and Narages was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment in a high-security prison. Given that this is Sweden we're talking about, the facility resembled more of a decent 3-star hotel. His lawyer attempted to appeal the verdict, but the appeal was rejected. In early 2017, Naragic himself applied for deportation and transferred to a prison in his homeland. The reasons for this decision were unknown. Lithuanian prisons are significantly worse than Swedish ones, yet the court decided to approve his request. After all, providing comfortable conditions of detention costs Swedish taxpayers several $100s per day for each individual inmate. Later that same year, his motives became clear. He appealed to Lithuanian court and his sentence was reduced from life to 15 years. However, the joy was short-lived for the murderer. A few weeks later, the court overturned his decision, and Naragius was once again destined to spend his entire life in prison. Only now, he had no chance of returning to the comfortable Swedish cell. 5 years later, in August 2022, Naragius faced yet another downside of being transferred to a Lithuanian prison. While inmates were being moved to another block, one of them attacked Naragius with a shank. He suffered serious injuries and died on the way to the hospital. As for his wife, the question of her involvement is still not entirely ruled out. Police noted that there is practically no chance of her direct involvement in the abduction or murder. If that were true, experts would have detected his DNA on Lisa's clothes or belongings. Still, it's possible that she was aware of her husband's crime and aided him in escaping justice by giving a false alibi. Naragi's younger brother also raises suspicion. Cafe staff reported seeing 2 men near the barn watching them. Since one was likely Naragi's, the other was probably his brother. However, no DNA from the brother was found either in the barn or on Lisa's clothing, suggesting he was probably not involved in the murder. Perhaps they were merely watching the young employees together, and even talking inappropriately, but only Naragi's carried out the brutal crime. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video, and remember, the search for truth never stops.